Hello. I'm here today to film my November wrap up. It's probably going to be a little bit short and sweet because overall I didn't actually read that many books this month. I read 7 in total, 5 of which were audiobooks, which is very high for me overall. I'm still having a bit of a problem taking audiobooks that I read seriously. I have a hard time thinking of them as actual books, although they do count, they are real books. Just have to keep telling myself that. The first half of the month went very well. I read a lot of books for Nonfiction November, and then I sort of puttered out in the middle. I don't know, I think I was just sort of overwhelmed with what was happening in the world and just fell out of the mood a little bit. I think I'm actually also going to talk about the DNFs that I had this month because there were quite a few. But without further ado, let's get to the books themselves. The first book that I read this month is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. All Boys Aren't Blue is a memoir and essays of a young child growing up Black and queer in New Jersey. Overall, I very much enjoyed it. I did realize after I finished reading it and once I went on Goodreads that it is a nonfiction book that's specifically written for a young adult audience. So I think that explains away some of the caveats that I had to my good rating. I did feel overall the language was a little bit simplistic, but it was very interesting learning about this person's experiences growing up. This memoir, it definitely sort of speaks to the multiplicity of experiences people have at the intersections of their various identities, and I do think it was worthwhile. I think overall, given my issues with the language, I did sort of think I would give it a 3. I didn't actually rate it on Goodreads because it is a newer release, and I feel like my ratings sometimes are rather harsh. So yeah, I would recommend this to you if you're interested in reading about that sort of experience, especially if you enjoy YA. I do think that there should be more nonfiction directed directly towards a young adult audience, so I'm definitely glad that this book is here filling that gap. After that, I read Educated by Tara Westover, which I talked about extensively in my Nonfiction November reading vlog. And I really enjoyed this book. I give it 4 stars overall. Basically, Educated is about Tara Westover's experience growing up in rural Idaho, being raised by Mormon prepper parents. So they didn't believe in government programs on any level. Tara and her siblings were born at home. They did not receive birth certificates when they were born, never went to the hospital for any reason, and they were homeschooled by their mother, which basically meant that they started working as children in their father's scrapyard. So this is the story of Tara coming to education late in her life. She does end up going to Brigham Young University in Utah, and sort of it's her story of splitting away from her family's ideology, I guess, through education. Overall, I thought it was very interesting. I did sort of have a lot of my normal problems that I have with memoir, in that I always sort of crave context when I'm reading about one person's experience. Like, I want to know, like, this was her experience. She is obviously incredibly smart and did really well in college, even though obviously she had a steep learning curve, having never gone to school before in her life. But what about other off-the-grid kids? What about people who don't have the sort of lucky breaks that she did have? What about the people who, you know, didn't have mentors that they could turn to guide them through that sort of late in life transformation, I guess. So with that as an understood aspect of the book, that this is just her experience, I did really enjoy it. She is a great writer. So overall, I thought it was really interesting and worth a read if you haven't read it. Which, this is the book that I read for the Buzz prompt for the Nonfiction November challenges, because it is a very buzzed book overall. So you've probably read it or at least heard of it before. After that, I read Brain on Fire, My Month of Madness, which is about the author Susannah Cahalan's experience going through a stage of temporary insanity. Basically, she starts having neurological symptoms such as paranoia and more explicit symptoms such as seizures, and is hospitalized for these symptoms. And it's a bit of a medical mystery book where they're trying to figure out what exactly is going wrong with her. She herself has no memories from this period, basically. So the book is her own reconstruction of that month through doctor's notes and the experiences of her friends and family. I also found this book very interesting. It's a very interesting medical mystery. I read it for the discovery prompt for Nonfiction November, and I think I gave it 3 stars overall, again, because I think it suffered from a lack of context. A lot of what happens to Susannah in her own story is because her friends and families had the resources to look after her relentlessly. I definitely would have been interested to hear more about other people who have suffered from mental breaks that may have been lost in the system. I don't know. I think I always have a hard time accepting memoir for what it is, which is this one person's story. So this is a failing in myself, in my own reading habits and what I expect out of books, but it was very good. I do think overall one major thing that I took away is that even though this wasn't discussed a lot, there was a big emphasis in the book was that like she was on the neurological floor or the seizure floor of NYU's medical center, and the big threat throughout the entire book was the idea of her being institutionalized because they just would decide that she's crazy and that she should be in a psych ward. And that was sort of like the big bad wolf that was portrayed throughout the whole thing, which I don't really understand or agree with. Like, I'm sure that's how it felt to her and her family, but also, like, if you have a psychological condition, like, there's no reason why she shouldn't go to the psych ward. Like, the psych ward is where you can be appropriately treated for like a true mental illness. So I think that maybe a different emphasis would be, why is there such a separation in between neurology and like psychiatry when it is all based in, you know, your biological synapses, squishy brain, whatever. Just because we don't understand why something like schizophrenia or bipolar exists from a physical perspective doesn't mean it's not a physical disease. Anyways, it just brought up some interesting things to think about. I think that the book itself didn't really address, but I definitely would be interested in reading into that topic a bit more. So if anybody has any suggestions, I'm here for it. I feel like I always say that. This channel is just an excuse for me to get recommendations from you on books that I should read. I then read We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This was a buddy read that I did with Milena, and I have to say that this is probably one of the best books that I read this month. Overall, I rated it 4 stars. I really appreciated sort of like the atmosphere building throughout it. Basically, the premise is there are 2 sisters living in a big rundown house, and they live with their uncle, and there is a event in the recent past, which you find out pretty quickly, is that their entire family was poisoned, except for Mary Cat, who's the narrator, and her sister Constance. It was a lot about the sisters' relationships with each other and with the town, and their relatives. At some point, a cousin comes to stay with them, and I feel like that's not a great like summary of what this book is actually about, but I highly recommend reading it. I talked about it a little bit in my November reading vlog, so I read like half of these books during that November reading log, so there you go. After that, I read The Innocence of Father Brown. Sorry. After that, I read The Innocence of Father Brown by G.K. Chesterton. And this is a short story collection about Father Brown, who is sort of an amateur sleuth. He is also a Catholic priest, so there is quite a bit of talk about religion in this. I will say that I think I rated the first half 4 stars and the second half 2 stars. So overall, we're averaging that out to a 3-star. I found these stories very entertaining. Unfortunately, towards the end, there is a bit of xenophobia and stuff that you would label as of a time, which is something that I hate continuing to say on this. But if you are interested in it, you could just read the first half. It's short stories. There's no reason why you have to worry about the second half if you don't want to. Yeah, there's also a fun evil atheist trope where it's like, oh, yes, the atheists, they're murdering people because they have no reason not to, because there is no God to them. And that's sort of fun as like I guess people thought that / think this. Anyways, it was a different perspective. This was actually a reread for me, so I should have remembered all this, but I have a notoriously terrible memory. After that, I sort of had a bit of a reading slump overall. I think I finished the G.K. Chesterton probably mid-November, and since then I have completed 2 100-page books. And I also DNF'd many books. But let's talk about what I actually read first. So after The Innocence of Father Brown, I read Once Upon a Time in the North, which is a Phillip Pullman book. Basically, it's a little novella about how Lee Scoresby and Erik Bernardson met before the Golden Compass series. Basically, it's like Philip Pullman writing fan fiction about his own universe that he created. But I'm here for it. Lee is my favorite character in... Well, I don't know if that's possible to say. Lee is at least one of my favorite characters. I think Lee is my favorite character. Let's talk with conviction. Lee is my favorite character in The Golden Compass. So I didn't mind hearing more about his backstory overall. But that being said, this didn't really blow me away in any way, so I did rate it a 3-star. I liked it. It was not a waste of time. It was just sort of like a brain placeholder. And then after that, I reread The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. This is one of my favorite books. It is a 5 stars, but I've read it before. I managed to add a lot of, I don't know if you can see that, but I added even more annotations this time. This is technically a collection of essays, even though it's only 2. The first one is a letter to his nephew, I think on his 15th birthday. And the second is a more extended essay called Down at the Cross, Letters from a Region in My Mind. And it's sort of autobiographical. He talks a lot about coming up in Harlem and coming to religion and then falling out of religion. And then he also talks about the Nation of Islam quite a bit. So it's a lot about, growing up Black in America in the mid-20th century, how religion fits into that as sort of both a power structure that can be used by both Black and white people and in a way as an opiate for the masses. I think that's Orwell. I forget who said that. But it's just a really interesting essay, and James Baldwin writes so well. I mean, all of my favorite books, it sort of comes down to, on a sentence level, I just love reading every sentence. All of his arguments and, memories are so well constructed. It's just a joy to follow along with them, even if it's not oh, there's a plot or there's forward motion at all. So anyways, that was a good way to finish off November. But because I mentioned it, I thought I would just go through the number of books. The number of books that I DNF'd this month was wild. I have to say here, these are books that I'm actually DNFing. I read some and decided, no, I'm absolutely not coming back to this. I did also start some other books that are just sort of going on in the background. So yeah, I had a really unfocused reading month, basically, is what I'm trying to tell you. I will just quickly go down the list of books that I returned to the library unread. Oh my god. Oh, there are so many. Okay, so first one was A History of America in 10 Strikes, which I talked about during my vlog. I also talked about Tough Liberal, which I returned very quickly. I only listened to like 20 minutes of that. I got maybe 60 or 70 pages into Dorothy L. Sayers' Whose Body? I would like to think that I'm going to come back to this at some point, but also like it's like 150 pages long and I couldn't just finish it. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make that work. Who knows? I got The Girl in Red by Christina Henry out of the library and returned that after listening to it for like an hour. I got a sort of very, very short nonfiction pamphlet-y book called How to Not Always Be Working by Marley Grace, and I did not finish that. Yikes. Oh, I got A Tunnel of Bones out of the library, which is a V. Schwab middle grade book. Did not finish that. Writing to Learn, I read about 100 pages of that, and I did not finish it. I got Decisive out of the library by Chip Heath, and as you can tell, I could use some help being more decisive in my life. The first bit of this I read, like the first 60 to 100 pages, is about how you should be slower and less decisive in your life, and I was like, I don't think this is my problem. I think I have the reverse problem of this. Like, I want somebody to tell me how to make a snap decision. And I feel like all psychology books about decision making is like, you should not be making snap decisions. And I'm like, I don't make any snap decisions. If you like yell something at me and you're like, choose, I'd just be like, Anyways, sidebar. Sorry. So I DNF'd Decisive by Chip Heath. I DNF'd The Shape of Water by Andrea Camilleri. I got literally 2/3 of the way through Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat by Bruce Daisley, and then I DNF'd it. I started Spirit Run by Noé Alvarez, and I DNF'd it. I started Cant Even by Anne Helen Peterson and read almost 200 pages of it before I DNF'd it. What is wrong with me? I have to say that I am particularly disappointed about Cant Even because that was one of my most anticipated books of the fall. I love Anne Helen Peterson's writing on the internet. I think that she does really amazing, very interesting work on a lot of modern political and social issues. So definitely go seek out her writing. This book just suffered from that nonfiction book deal problem where it's derived from a viral article, and instead of taking the viral article and going in an interesting direction, it basically is just expanding on the viral article by adding more like anecdotes from people. Anyways, I was very disappointed that I did not like that one overall. Oh, we're not done yet. One more. I also got If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio out of the library, and I DNF'd that. So this is why, even though like when I actually look at the books that I've read, I feel like I had a pretty good reading month. Like, how did I DNF 10 books? Let me count how many books that is. So I DNF'd 12 books this month, and I read 7. If that's not spinning out, I don't know what is. I think, just like a post-mortem here, I think part of my problem is that I got very obsessed with the idea of reading 100 books in 2020. I'm at like 85 right now. And so if I had a really good November, it definitely would be in my grasp to hit 100. But I think because I got so focused on like wanting to read a number of books, In November, I just like didn't allow myself to sink in and actually enjoy any. So in December, I'm trying to like completely put the 100 books thing out of my mind. I do not want to read 15 books in December. I feel like that's just setting myself up for an unhappy reading month. But I'm just going to try to like read intuitively, finish up some books that I, have had on the back burner for a long time. I have like 3 or 4 essay collections that I only have 100 pages left in. And, just enjoy myself. It's the end of the year. Hopefully I'm going to take some vacation. I don't know. It's going to be great. Let me know how your November went, reading-wise, otherwise, and I will see you in another video. Bye.